10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And I hope you all had a good time. It looks like I've had a lot of views in my 2 previous videos. And I would appreciate if you subscribe. You see, if you subscribe and you like, the more likes and subscriptions I get, the more likely that this channel can grow and the more likely we can discuss materials like the ones I'm going to discuss and the ones previously discussed. By the end of this video, you will understand why multiculturalism is the best way for us to peacefully coexist. But for multiculturalism to really work, it needs to be paired with a Western concept. I am going to compare multiculturalism with its alternative, assimilation. While other options like segregation and isolationism exist, these two are generally frowned upon. Assimilation, however, is seen as a viable and good alternative to multiculturalism. Keep watching to find out what that key concept is. Capitalism has been implemented in most of the Western world. But what is multiculturalism? It's about allowing multiple cultures to exist within one country. Recently, multiculturalism has come under attack. In the West, especially in countries like France and the UK, some people are campaigning against it. Their argument often goes something like this: if you don't want to learn our culture and language and assimilate, then go back to your country. So, what is assimilation? It's the process of becoming similar to others by adopting their customs and culture, sometimes by choice, other times by force. Some people believe assimilation is the best way to achieve peaceful coexistence. For example, in France, some politicians argue that everyone should learn French customs and traditions. But the big question is, who gets to define those traditions and customs? Imagine if Prime Minister Disraeli came back to present-day Britain with his full memory.
He'll be shocked to find out that Britain has had 3 female prime ministers and recently an Asian prime minister. He'll probably be like, I'm imagining him, is it that? What is going on here? Well, I can't imitate the old British accent, forget it. But you get my point, you know? Maybe, you know, what is, I don't know how they would say, but yeah, you get the point, right? It might be so shocking when he sees this that he would have a heart attack and die again. Or think about Woodrow Wilson arriving in 21st century America. He would see that Obama was president for 2 terms and that interracial marriages are legal. This would shock him too. My point is that cultures and traditions change over time. The past is a different country. So assimilationists need to answer this. Who decides what the core traditions and values are? Historically, assimilation has had its issues, especially due to in-group, out-group attitudes. Basically, people are going to be more observant of someone who is expected to be from another country, even if they have assimilated the culture. Associate race, for example, with a country. And this can happen if somebody says this person is from the UK, we tend to think that that person is British. So that person who is more British, a white person who happens to be from Britain but grew up in America, or a black person who grew up in England. Of course, a black person who grew up in England, right? But it's just an in-group, out-group attitude in human beings, because we identify people of a certain race with a certain region. If I had Japanese citizenship, which I don't, make that clear, you wouldn't assume that I'm Japanese. That's obvious, right? The colonial era is another example of a massive assimilation experiment that did not work well. Even after gaining independence, many African countries discouraged speaking anything other than English in schools. This was not known as vernacular. When I was in school, it wasn't unusual to be punished, even beaten, for speaking in a native language. This was after independence. The legacy of colonialism runs deep. My parents had English names, and so did my grandparents. My great-grandmother had a traditional name. The Christian faith was often imposed. Some colonial officials genuinely believed that westernizing everyone was the right approach, and this was disastrous to native populations. In some cases, it even led to genocides. We had residential schools in Canada and America, the impacts of which are still felt today. So overall, forced assimilation has been a disaster. I use the word forced here because if you choose to assimilate yourself individually into another culture, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, what about multiculturalism? It has its challenges too. In a country, you want the nation to be cohesive. For instance, if Italian Americans don't assimilate in America, they might feel more loyalty to Italy than America. You can apply this example to any other group. If people don't assimilate, it can lead to civil unrest. Look at Singapore. The late Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, who is a hero of mine, made everyone speak English and introduced many Western practices. These changes, such as requiring everyone to speak English, have united diverse groups and prevented civil strife in Singapore. This shows that assimilation can work, but Singapore has an advantage. It's a small country. larger countries might struggle to impose a single language or culture. Another reason why I divert from one of my girls from Singapore is there is a downside to forced assimilation. It can violate human rights. In Singapore, there were a number of human rights issues during the reign of Lee Kuan Yew. Just imagine being forced to speak English and you've spoken, say, Mandarin for 50 years. That might have been very difficult for me. I'm a big believer in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. One way to balance the issues of forced assimilation and the challenges of multiculturalism is through what is known as coupling. Coupling multiculturalism with individualism is the key. Let me use myself as an example. I'm very westernized. Some fellow Africans even joke that I am a white person in a black skin. They use the word muzungu, so it means white person in my language. I'm proud to be a Westerner, and I'm proud to be an American as well. Some Africans think I'm odd. The point here is that multiculturalism allows individuals to choose their own path. People who want to assimilate, like I have, should be free to do so without facing intimidation, shaming, or bullying. That's why I believe in coupling multiculturalism with individualism. In some cultures, arranged marriages are common. But if someone chooses not to have an arranged marriage and instead embraces a completely Western lifestyle, they should be free to do so without facing pressure or intimidation or being shamed. Everyone should be allowed to choose their own path. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights supports this too. People have the right to change a culture and assimilate into a new one. Assimilation should never be forced or even nudged, but if someone chooses to assimilate, they should be supported, not condemned by their community. In France, some nationalists argue that women in certain cultures aren't allowed to wear what they want, so they propose banning the burqa and even the hijab. I think the burqa has already been banned in public places, if I'm not mistaken. While I reckon this is completely wrong, we need to address the reasoning behind such arguments. To make multiculturalism work, we need to embrace individualism. People should be free to choose a different lifestyle or culture without facing consequences of bullying. For example, if someone is American and chooses to adopt a Chinese customs, they should be allowed to do so without facing any backlash. In some cultures, women have been even killed in so-called honor killings. If we want to avoid forced assimilation, we must reject these practices. We must not give an excuse to nationalists and extremists to introduce policies from the time of colonialism of forced assimilation. In conclusion, multiculturalism is the best way to peacefully coexist, but it must be paired with individualism if it is to flourish. But what do you think? Do you think assimilation is better and therefore disagree with me? Write in the comments. Thank you for watching.